They say when someone disappears quietly, no one notices until something breaks. I didn't scream. I didn't run. I just left. Not because of a fight or a single moment, but because of everything that came before it. The silence, the small betrayals, the weight of being the one who always held it together. This is not just a story about a wedding that fell apart. It's about what happens when you stop living for other people and start asking who you really are when no one's watching. If any part of that feels familiar, stay with me. And if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, and leave a comment. This channel shares real stories about ordinary people with anything but ordinary lives. Maybe you'll see a part of yourself here too. My name is Emma Rivers. I'm 29 years old, born and raised in a small town just outside Eugene, Oregon, the kind of place where everyone still waves at each other from their porches, but no one really says what they mean. If you had asked anyone who knew me growing up, they'd probably say I was the calm one, the organized one, the good daughter, the type who color-coded her school binders and said, "Thank you," without being reminded. I was the one teachers praised and parents trusted. I didn't slam doors. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't fall apart. Ever. At least, not where anyone could see. My sister Sophie was different. She was all feeling. No breaks. A hurricane in a dress with a laugh that echoed down hallways, even when it wasn't funny. She wore chaos like perfume. Sweet, loud, impossible to ignore. If I was a straight line, Sophie was scribbles on the wall. My parents. They loved us both, I think. But the love didn't look the same. They understood Sophie. She was wild, but vulnerable. Always breaking something. A rule, a promise, a heart. And when she did, they rushed in to fix it. Me? I was the one they counted on to hold things together. I don't think they meant to ignore me. I think they just assumed I didn't need anything. And for a long time, I believed them. I became a master of being fine, of being helpful, dependable, invisible in all the right ways. I learned to swallow disappointment without blinking, to carry guilt that didn't belong to me, to smile when something hurt. It's strange how easy it is to mistake suppression for strength, how people reward you for disappearing. But something changed last fall, and not all at once. It was like standing in a familiar room and realizing the furniture had been slowly replaced when you weren't looking. It started with an engagement, Sophie's. She called me from the parking lot of a jewelry store, breathless, excited, high on the glow of being chosen. I remember her voice bouncing through the phone, calling him the one, like she had finally found the missing puzzle piece. His name was Zach. I hadn't met him. She barely had. And yet, she wanted me to be her maid of honor. "You're my rock," she said. "You always have been." I said yes. Of course I did. But something in me, something small and buried, flinched. I didn't know why. I didn't let myself know why. Not then. The weeks that followed were a blur of planning, Pinterest boards, endless group texts about napkin colors and signature cocktails. I played my part, smiled at the right moments, sent links, booked fittings, bit my tongue, until the silence started. At first, it was little things. My name missing from an email. A bridesmaid meeting I wasn't told about. My suggestions brushed off like lint. I tried to ignore it, convinced myself it was nothing, that I was being too sensitive, too needy, too something. But then, one morning, I woke up to a text, a single, surgical line. "Hey Em, we decided to downsize the bridal party. Hope you understand. No call, no conversation, no explanation, just erased." I stared at that message for what felt like hours. My fingers trembled, but I didn't cry. Not then. I did what I always did. I shut the feeling in a box and moved on, but the box was full, overfull, and something in me whispered, enough. I didn't respond to the message. Not right away. I told myself I needed time to process it, but really I was waiting to feel less pathetic, less discarded. 3 days passed. On the fourth, I sat in my car outside a grocery store with the text still open on my phone. I kept reading it like it would change if I looked long enough. Maybe the words would soften. Maybe a second message would follow. Something, anything, that would remind me I wasn't invisible. It never came. Inside the store, I wandered the aisles with a half-empty basket and no real plan. A woman brushed past me, laughing into her speakerphone about her sister's bachelorette weekend in Vegas, and for some reason, that's what did it. My hand started shaking again, right there between canned tomatoes and almond milk. I abandoned the basket and walked out. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan. I thought about all the things I hadn't said. Not just now, ever. Every swallowed protest. Every moment I let someone else's comfort matter more than my truth. I thought about the way my mother said, "Sophie's just sensitive," whenever I tried to express a boundary. The way my father said, "You know your sister needs more support than you do." The way I agreed, every single time, without even knowing I was agreeing. And for what? So I could be the reliable one? The one who holds everything while no one ever thinks to ask what it costs? Around 2 a.m., I got up, sat at my kitchen table, and opened my laptop. No plan. No idea what I was looking for. Just a gnawing need to go. Somewhere. Anywhere. I typed, "Solo Women Retreats Costa Rica." It sounded like a joke, even in my head. Like something people with vision boards and kombucha subscriptions did after breakups. Not something I did. But there it was. The first link. Jungle immersion. Digital detox. Yoga. Healing. I stared at it for a long time. My hand hovered over the trackpad. There was no sudden epiphany. No voice from the sky telling me this was it. There was just a flicker of something, like a match being struck in a dark room. And for once, I didn't blow it out. I clicked. By sunrise, the flight was booked. 14 days in the southern mountains of Costa Rica. No cell service, shared rooms, plant-based meals, morning meditations, silence after 9 p.m. The irony wasn't lost on me. For years, I had trained myself to be silent. Now I was paying for it. I left a note for my parents, told them I was taking time off, that I needed space. I didn't mention Sophie. I didn't say the word wedding. I didn't say goodbye. The airport was quiet. Too quiet. I kept waiting for panic to set in, kept waiting to regret this strange, impulsive thing I was doing, the kind of thing Sophie would have done. But all I felt was numb. Like I'd finally stepped outside the role I'd played for so long, and now I didn't know where to stand. On the plane, somewhere over the Gulf of Mexico, I watched the clouds melt beneath us like soft ice. My phone was on airplane mode, but I checked it anyway. Some dumb habit of hope. No texts, no calls, not even from my mom. And then something strange happened. I smiled. Not because it didn't hurt, it did. But because, for the first time in years, the silence wasn't suffocating. It was mine. The heat hit me like a second skin the moment I stepped off the plane in San Jose. Thick, humming, almost alive. It clung to my arms and neck, coating everything in a film of something wild and unfamiliar. The airport buzzed in Spanish and English, a blur of travelers, stray dogs, and distant music spilling from car windows. It was loud, messy, disorienting. And somehow, it felt honest. A man with a hand-painted sign that read, "Selva Luz Retreat," waited near the exit. He smiled when he saw me, as if we already knew each other. His name was Mateo. He didn't ask questions, just took my bag and said, "It's about a 3-hour drive. The roads get strange near the end." I didn't know what that meant. I didn't ask. We drove into the green. At first, there were roads, paved, reasonable, with signs. But slowly, the world began to unravel. Buildings gave way to trees. Trees gave way to something deeper. The road narrowed to a gravel path that curved like a serpent between cliffs and forest walls. The air changed too. Wetter, denser, smelling of earth and something sweet I couldn't place. By the time we reached the retreat, the sun had dipped low behind the mountains. The jungle was breathing. I could feel it in my chest. A rhythm that didn't belong to me, but that somehow knew I was there. The compound was simple: wooden cabins with open windows, lanterns instead of lights, hammocks swaying between trees. There was no reception desk, no staff uniforms, just a woman in linen pants and bare feet who handed me a metal water bottle and said, "We're not here to fix you, just to remind you who you were before the noise." Her name was Lucia. She led me to my room, a modest wooden structure with mosquito netting, a single bed, a journal on the nightstand, and a candle I was supposed to light each night before sleep. No mirrors, no clocks, no Wi-Fi. My phone stayed in a locked box by the entrance. I didn't ask for the key. That night, I lay in bed listening to the jungle. Not the silence I had imagined, but a symphony of chirps, howls, rustling leaves, distant thunder. It was chaotic, beautiful, indifferent to me. I didn't sleep much. My body was still trying to catch up with the decision my soul had already made. The next morning, we began in silence. At 6 a.m., a bell rang. Not an alarm, a real bell, somewhere in the trees. I followed the others to a wooden platform that opened onto the valley below. 10 of us, all strangers, some older, some younger. A woman with a shaved head and scars on her arms. A man who looked like he hadn't spoken in years. No one made eye contact. That was part of the practice. No names, no introductions, for the first 3 days. Just presence. We sat. We breathed. We moved slowly in shapes that felt foreign at first. My body trembled with tension I hadn't noticed before. When I reached down, it was like my arms didn't belong to me. That afternoon, it rained. Not a drizzle, but a full, roaring collapse of the sky. I stood outside in it, barefoot, my hands open. And for a moment, I wasn't thinking about Sophie, or Zach, or my parents. I wasn't thinking at all. Later, back in my room, I opened the journal. The pages were blank. I stared at them for hours. Finally, I wrote a single sentence. "I don't know who I am when no one needs me." I stared at it until the candle burned low. My chest felt tight. Not painful exactly, just full. Like something I'd carried for years was shifting inside me. At dinner, we ate in silence again. Quinoa, plantains, lentils, fresh mango. Everything tasted like it had just been pulled from the earth. I looked around at the others, their tired eyes, the way they held their bowls like something sacred. I wondered what brought them here, what they were running from, what they were trying to remember. That night, I dreamed I was back home, standing in the center of my parents' living room. Everything looked the same, but no one could see me. I tried to speak, but my mouth wouldn't move. They walked past me, laughing, carrying wedding invitations and folded linens, glasses of wine and polite apologies. Sophie was there too, in her dress, smiling, glowing. And when I reached for her, she turned away. When I woke up, my face was wet. I didn't know if I had cried in the dream or in real life, but I knew something was starting to break open. and for the first time in a very long time, I didn't try to stop it. By the end of the third day, the silence began to speak in ways I hadn't expected. At first, it was just discomfort, the kind that sits in your chest and doesn't let go. Without the constant hum of screens, notifications, polite small talk, I had nothing to hide behind. I couldn't disappear into being helpful here. No one asked for anything from me. No one expected anything either. It was unnerving. I caught myself scanning the faces of the others during yoga or meal prep, looking for signs of who they were, why they had come. The woman with the shaved head hadn't smiled once. The quiet man with the journal always wrote with his left hand, like it hurt him. There was a girl, maybe 20, 21, who cried every morning during meditation, but never wiped the tears away. No one talked about it. No one tried to fix it. It was like we were all learning, in our own ways, that pain didn't need to be explained to be real. One afternoon, Lucia led us deep into the jungle. We hiked for hours without speaking, single file, through thick green corridors that breathed steam and life around us. Monkeys called in the distance. Birds screamed like they were warning us. Roots curled like veins across the forest floor, daring us to trip. At the end of the trail, we reached a waterfall. It wasn't tall, but the sound of it was violent, like it had been waiting too long to be heard. Lucia sat on a rock and simply said, "You don't have to let go. Just listen to what wants to stay." I didn't know what that meant. Not then. But as I stepped into the water, icy and fast and alive, something inside me loosened, like a knot I didn't know I had been holding. That night, back in my cabin, I lit the candle early. The journal was open before I even sat down. I wrote until my hand cramped. Not answers, not wisdom, just pieces of myself that had been trapped in old versions of me for too long. I think I became what they needed before I ever asked what I needed. Why did being strong always mean being silent? What if I had said no? That last question haunted me. What if I had told Sophie I didn't want to be her maid of honor? What if I had told our parents I was worried about Zach? Really worried? What if I had spoken out sooner, louder, when I saw the way they dismissed red flags as personality quirks? What if I had said, "I'm not okay with this," and meant it? What if I had refused to disappear? The next morning, Lucia asked if I wanted to help in the garden. I hadn't spoken in 3 days, but somehow I said yes. We spent hours barefoot in the dirt, planting roots, pulling weeds. The sun was heavy on our backs. She didn't ask anything of me, just handed me a trowel and said, "The earth remembers what we bury." At one point, I looked up and saw the girl who cried each morning watching me. Our eyes met, only for a second, and she nodded, as if she recognized something in me, something familiar. That evening, during our first community circle, we were allowed to speak again, but only if we wanted to. One by one, people began to share. Not stories, not traumas, just truths. The man with the journal said his name was Peter. He had just buried his mother. He had come here because he didn't know what to do with the guilt of feeling relieved. The girl's name was Mia. She had left college without telling anyone. She wasn't sure she was ever going back. When it was my turn, I hesitated. My mouth felt foreign. Finally, I said, "I'm not sure if I came here to run away or to come home, but I think maybe both can be true." No one said anything. They didn't have to. But that night, I dreamed of Sophie again. She was younger this time, maybe 10, sitting cross-legged on our childhood bed, crying over a broken bracelet. I was there too, holding the pieces, saying, "I'll fix it." Again. Always. Except this time, I didn't. I sat beside her, quietly. Let the pieces stay broken. In the dream, she looked up at me and whispered, Thank you. When I woke, the jungle was quiet. Unusually quiet. The air was still, heavy, like something was holding its breath. Later that morning, Lucia handed me a folded note. It had arrived through one of the volunteers who hiked into town every few days for supplies. It was from home. The paper was creased, smudged with fingerprints. 2 lines, written in my mother's hand. Sophie called off the wedding. It's complicated. Please come home when you're ready. I read it twice, then again. And suddenly the silence around me didn't feel so peaceful. It felt like the beginning of a storm. The note sat on my nightstand for 2 days, folded, quiet, heavy in its simplicity. Sophie called off the wedding. Complicated. Please come home when you're ready. I read it again every morning, as if the words might rearrange themselves, offering something more, an explanation, an apology, a reason that made sense. But no matter how many times I unfolded it, it stayed the same. Too little, too late, and yet, somehow still a thread tied tightly around my chest. The others at the retreat noticed something had shifted. I could feel it in their glances. Soft, curious, unsure whether to ask. Lucia didn't say anything, but I saw her watching me more closely. Her silences had weight now. They weren't blank spaces. They were invitations. On the 3rd evening after the letter came, she joined me near the fire pit as I stirred herbs into hot water. We didn't speak at first. The fire crackled. Cicadas buzzed somewhere far off. Then, quietly, she said, "You don't have to go back just because the door opens." I didn't respond. I just stared into the flames, trying to understand why her words made something in my throat ache. "But," she added, "sometimes the only way to really come home is to leave differently." That night, I sat in bed with my journal open, but untouched. The candle's flame danced on the wall like it was trying to mimic something alive, something restless. I couldn't write. I couldn't even think clearly. I felt like 2 people were fighting for space inside me. The old Emma, the one who always ran toward crisis, toward duty, toward being useful, and the Emma who had learned, in stillness, that being needed and being loved weren't the same thing. By morning, I knew I couldn't stay in the jungle forever, but I also knew I couldn't go back on autopilot. I wouldn't return to being the invisible backbone of a family that didn't realize how much I bled to hold them up. If I was going back, it had to be on new terms. When I finally told Lucia I was leaving, she didn't ask why. She just hugged me. The kind of hug that didn't promise it would all be okay, only that I wouldn't be alone inside it. I left the retreat 2 days later. Mateo picked me up again. This time, the road felt different. Less like I was being swallowed by the jungle, and more like it had gently released me. On the way to the airport, I didn't check my phone. I didn't even unlock it. The world had waited this long without me. It could wait a little longer. The flight home was quiet. Too quiet. My stomach churned the closer we got to Oregon, like it could feel something my mind wasn't ready to name. I kept thinking about the dream, the one where Sophie thanked me for not fixing the bracelet. I wondered if that was just a dream, or a version of the truth I was finally ready to believe. My parents didn't meet me at the airport. I hadn't told them when I'd land. I didn't want a welcome party. I didn't want wide eyes and quick explanations and nervous energy. I just wanted space to breathe as whoever I was now. The house looked the same when I pulled up. Same mailbox, same porch light, same wind chimes made from old silverware that my mom insisted were charming. I stood in the driveway for a long time, hand still on the car door, watching the windows glow in the early evening. When I finally walked up, the door opened before I could knock. My mother stood there holding a dish towel, her eyes red-rimmed but not surprised. She looked older than I remembered. Or maybe I was just seeing her clearly for the first time. She didn't say my name, didn't rush in with excuses or questions. Instead, she stepped aside and whispered, "Come in when you're ready." Inside, the air smelled like lemon and old furniture. My father stood near the dining room table, his arms crossed in that way he does when he's not sure if he's in trouble. And Sophie. Sophie was sitting on the couch, knees pulled to her chest like a child. She looked up when she saw me. Her face was bare, no makeup, no mask. Her eyes met mine, and I swear, for a second, we were just two girls again. Not sisters, not rivals, not responsibilities, just girls. Tired, raw, real. She opened her mouth to speak. I raised my hand gently. "I'm not here to fix anything," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "I'm just here to tell the truth." The room fell silent, and for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of what came next. No one moved at first. The air in the living room hung thick with all the things we hadn't said for years: expectations, disappointments, assumptions we wore like skin. I stood in it like someone who had returned to the scene of a fire long after the flames had gone out, staring at the shape of what used to be home. My father was the first to speak. He cleared his throat, awkwardly, like it had rusted over, and said, "We didn't mean for things to get so far." It wasn't an apology, but it wasn't defensiveness either. It was something smaller, a beginning. Sophie looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her voice cracked when she said, "I didn't know how to say you were right. About Zach. About everything." I didn't let that soothe me. Not yet. Because it wasn't about being right. It never was. I sat down across from her, the old leather armchair that creaked like it remembered me. I looked around the room, the family portraits on the wall, the chipped coffee table I once did my homework on, the blanket my mother always folded perfectly even though no one ever used it. And then, I began. I told them what it felt like growing up in the shadow of someone else's needs, what it meant to be the one who never caused trouble, and how that invisibility hurt more than anything. I told them about the phone call I never got, about the text message that said everything and nothing. I told them how it felt to be erased from my sister's wedding without a word, and how it wasn't just about the wedding. It was about every time I had smiled through something that shattered me. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just told the truth. And somehow, that was louder than any rage could have been. My mother had tears in her eyes by the time I finished. She reached for my hand, then hesitated, like she wasn't sure if she was allowed. I let her. Not because everything was okay, but because it wasn't, and it had to start somewhere. "We thought you didn't need anything," she whispered. "You always held it together." "I was holding it together because I thought I had to," I said. But no one asked what it was costing me. We sat in silence after that. Not the kind that avoids, the kind that lets what was said settle, like dust in a room newly opened. That week, we began family therapy. It was awkward at first, clumsy, sometimes painful, sometimes too quiet, sometimes too loud. But something shifted. We were finally learning how to speak without defending, how to listen without bracing, how to say, "That hurt me," without being told it didn't. Sophie and I went on long walks, not to fix each other, but just to learn who we were now. Sometimes we didn't talk at all. Sometimes we did, about things we never dared bring up before. She told me about how lonely it was to be the one everyone worried about. I told her how lonely it was to be the one no one worried about. For the first time in our lives, we met in the middle, without comparison, without blame. Just two women finally seeing each other clearly. 6 months passed. Summer turned to fall. The leaves outside our parents' house burned gold and amber, and for once, no one rushed to rake them. We let them fall. We let things be messy. Then came the night we all gathered again, around a long table, candles flickering, mismatched plates. laughter that didn't feel forced. Sophie cooked. My mom told a story that made my dad roll his eyes but still smile, and I just sat there for a moment, quietly watching it all. No one was pretending. No one was performing. We were just together. And when someone asked for a toast, I raised my glass and simply said, "To starting again." But this time, as ourselves. No one clapped. No one cried. But in the stillness that followed, I felt something settle inside me, something that had been restless for years. Not closure, but home. Not because I was finally seen, but because I had stopped hiding. And that, somehow, was enough. You know, life doesn't always break loudly. Sometimes it's quiet, slow, 1,000 little moments that teach you how easy it is to lose yourself in who others expect you to be. But here's what I've learned. Even when everything around you feels like it's falling apart, your family, your identity, the version of love you were raised on, you still have a choice. To stay kind, to stay honest, to stay human. Because at the end of the day, strength isn't about holding it all together. Sometimes, real strength is letting go. Speaking up, choosing yourself, even when it's the hardest thing to do. If this story touched something in you, please subscribe to the channel, give this video a like, and leave a comment. Here, we share true stories about real people who've lived through betrayal, silence, and everything in between, and still found a way to rise. Your story matters too. Maybe this is where it begins.